federal judge is ordering authorities to improve the living conditions at an ICE facility in the Chicago area. The ruling comes from Judge Robert Gettleman, who heard testimony earlier this week after a lawsuit accused the government of denying the detainees of proper access to food, water, and medical care.
It also alleged that the holding cells are overcrowded and don't have enough beds. The judge's order lists more than a dozen requirements for the facility. Some of those requirements include a clean bed and place to sleep, clean toilet facilities, hygiene products, and at least 3 full meals per day. The order also says the detainees must be provided with a list of attorneys in English and Spanish with interpreter services available if necessary. The lawsuit claimed people at the facility were coerced into signing documents they didn't understand and that they unknowingly gave up their rights. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin said he's tried to access the facility but has been denied. In a post on X, he writes, "Every member of Congress has the right to visit an ICE facility. It's part of the job. The Trump administration is denying visits, and it begs the question, what are they hiding? It's unprecedented, unlawful, and unacceptable."
The facility in question is in Broadview, just west of Chicago, and it's become a hotbed for anti-ICE protests. The Department of Homeland Security says it's made thousands of arrests in the Chicago area since it began its immigration crackdown, which is known as Operation Midway Blitz. But the DHS strongly denies the allegations brought up in the lawsuit, saying in a statement, despite hoaxes spread by criminal illegal aliens, the complicit media, and now an activist judge, the ICE Broadview facility does not have subprime conditions. All detainees are provided with 3 meals a day, water, and have access to phones to communicate with their family members and lawyers. No one is denied access to proper medical care.
So we'll see. I mean, the judge obviously contends that the complaints in this suit are, I think he used the term highly credible.
That's right.
And Tricia McLaughlin there addressed some of the contentious accusations, though not all of them. I mean, some of it is pretty gross, the idea that there's sort of overflowing toilets and things like that, that seem very unpleasant. If the judge has ordered an improvement of conditions, presumably he has some way of verifying whether that improvement takes place or not. And I think that obviously people who are detained should still be kept in humane conditions. I mean, there is a baseline of acceptable treatment of people who are being kept in what is in effect a detention facility, and that baseline should be met or cleared. The fear, I think, is that sometimes because of the administration's overall view of the immigration issue, I think there is a suspicion that they will frankly mistreat people. But, obviously I haven't been inside the facility to know. The fact that a judge finds the complaints credible carries quite a lot of weight to me.
Yeah, it's obviously hard to say whether or not the allegations are true or not without having an actual investigation of the facility. It's sort of a he said, she said kind of situation here. The judge determined that the immigrants were making credible claims. So, I mean, obviously if that's the case, that they are not receiving food or proper access to hygiene, then they should get that. And I think that everyone would agree that no matter what you're being detained for, you should be able to have basic human needs met, right? I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. One of the things that I have found myself semi-frustrated with in the reporting on some of the ICE detention facilities is that there's often an attempt to find fault where there isn't some. And so it actually gives the administration the opportunity to call fake news on any claim of care being substandard, like in this instance, if it's true. There was an article from the Washington Post recently that I wrote about in my newsletter where they were basically complaining about the fact that detention facilities on average were hotter than most prisons. And so reading the article, I'm thinking, okay, so they're going to make the claim that ICE detention facilities don't have proper air conditioning or that migrants are being housed in cells that are basically saunas. But their claim actually was that the ICE detention facilities on average are located in hotter areas, which, okay, well, the southern border obviously has higher temperatures on average than a large swath of the United States. The ICE detention facilities tend to be located there because of convenience, and prisons tend to be obviously more scattered throughout the United States. And so reading articles like that, and then you fast forward to immigrants claiming that they're actually not getting food. Like, those are two substantially different levels of allegations,
Right.
but they get lumped into one basket because there seems to be the intent sometimes from reporters to paint the entire administration as really uncaring and cruel to immigrants throughout the deportation process.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has been a problem throughout the whole Trump, well, since Trump first was president, in fact, since he first began running for president, I think there are things he has done that are scandalous. I also think there have been media reports about things that aren't that scandalous, that are characterized in that way. I'm often brought back there to a comment from Chris Rock, the comedian that always stuck in my mind when he was asked about media coverage of Trump and the related issue of media credibility. And he said if someone has robbed a bank 9 times, the media shouldn't report that he's robbed a bank 10 times. And his point was the idea that, to your point exactly, that it undercuts the credibility of legitimate complaints if you over-torque other comments. Now, I think that this all takes place within the context of an administration that not only is very talks about illegal immigrants in, I would argue, a dehumanizing way, but also, things like alligator Alcatraz and Trump's amusement at that and amusement at the idea of people who escape would be pursued by alligators and all of that kind of thing. All of that feeds into, I think, a legitimate fear of mistreatment of people. And I think there's a distinction even in popular or public opinion between wanting less illegal immigration or no illegal immigration and endorsing flagrant mistreatment or dehumanizing treatment of people. And I think, I'm sure there are a smaller number of people who do want pretty awful treatment of illegal immigrants, but that is, I think, a much smaller group than people who are just opposed to that migration patterns.
Yeah, most of the polls show that a slim majority of Americans still support mass deportation, but then also when you ask them about the strategy that the Trump administration is using, they will typically say that they think it goes too far. I think there's an argument to be made that those two things almost can't be separated. Like, if you are trying to actually remove every illegal immigrant from the country in a period of a 4-year presidency, then there are going to be cases where things are perceived as going too far because you're trying to do this in a fast manner. You're trying to do this in a very short period of time, and you're trying to meet certain benchmarks. And so I think that there's a bit of cognitive dissonance of, like, what does it actually take to get mass deportations?
Right.
And sometimes it's going to be things that make the average person feel a little uncomfortable, right? In terms of going back to the media coverage, one of the things that popped in my head as you were talking about that Chris Rock quote was the Epstein files. Because there was not much conversation about the Epstein files prior to Trump taking office the second time. And there's legitimate criticism, obviously, that we've raised on this show, that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie have raised, where the Trump administration has not been as transparent as they promised on the campaign trail. But at the same time, when it comes from Democrats who were largely silent about them previously, it feels like political manipulation. And so people who are very hard Trump supporters will look at that and say, well, I'm going to defend my president because I don't trust the intentions of the people who are criticizing him.
Right, and I think that goes both ways also. I think there are various issues where you can look back. A famous one setting out Trump outside of it was, Mitch McConnell and the not appointing judges in the final stretch of someone's term, and then they get into power and do completely the opposite. So I think those kinds of hypocrisies are problematic. And, on the immigration issue and the support for mass deportations, I do think that's a complicated one, because people will say, if you say, do you want to deport every person who's here illegally, a certain number of people will say yes. But then if you ask people, should the so-called dreamers be allowed to stay, a large number of people will say yes to that too. So it's a complicated issue, and a lot depends on how you ask the question.
All right, Republicans are scrambling for answers after being swept by Democrats in Tuesday's elections. Up next, what a former George Bush advisor says the party must do to perform better in the future.